So when Kylian Mbappe left Paris Saint-Germain last summer, it marked the end of an era. We all thought that this was the club that had backed all the Galacticos, Lionel Messi, Neymar, Mbappe. And Mbappe was the last one to leave, and it looked like they were taking a different direction, building a younger team. That's what they've done under Luis Enrique. And now they are one of the favourites, if not the favourite, to win the Champions League this season. So what has happened to PSG? How have they turned it around from the old philosophy to the new one? And so to check it out, to ask the question, we've got our very own PSG legend, really. He's Mr. Paris, Monsieur Paris. No pet parts outside the studio. Jules, tell us about PSG.
Hello, boys. Thank you for having me on. It's my debut, I think, like full debut.
Yeah, well, mate, it's your first appearance, and maybe sure it's not your last. That's the thing, isn't it?
I feel the pressure, to be fair. I feel the pressure. Where do you want me to start?
Well, I mean,
How did?
PSG is yours. I mean, obviously, we know that you're from Paris. PSG is your team. So, what's happened this season? Just sum it up.
Yeah, I mean, it was. I thought the project of the Galacticos had to come to an end. It hadn't worked really. It's as simple as that. I think it was good for the brand itself, for PSG as a club to get a bigger fan base, maybe money in terms of marketing and sponsorship deals and stuff like that. But on the pitch, you had some good moments, but overall, clearly, it was good trying something different. So you're right, everybody, all the big stars, the big egos left. Really, Kylian and Neymar, the last two after Messi the summer before, and then they started a new project basically with a younger team, maybe more French players too, even if some didn't really work out, like Colomwani, but the likes of Desiré Doué and Zaire Emery and those kind of guys. Barcola, Dembele working together, and then Luis Enrique having to shape this new squad, much younger squad in the image that he wanted to. And it's a team that would work together for each other. Everybody attacks, everybody defends. That kind of mentality, really, that was not really there before. Luis Enrique even himself said that if he had arrived when Messi was still there and Neymar and Mbappe, he would not have taken the job because it was mission impossible for him. And he's right. And now things work better because I think the squad is more receptive to what he wants to start with, and they're younger players, so more he can mold them into exactly what he wants. And he's created a team that had a slow start, especially in the Champions League, but really in the last 3 to 4 months has hit new heights in terms of that collective cohesion and collective strength.
I mean, me and you were at the Arsenal game last October at the Emirates, and they lost 2-0 that night, and it was quite a comprehensive defeat despite the scoreline, and they looked like a long way away from
Mm.
where they used to be. It looked like PSG of old was not going to happen again. You're thinking, what's the future of this team? But the kind of evolution has developed with the Champions League, hasn't it? Because they destroyed Man City in the Parc des Princes. I was at Stuttgart when they did the same to Stuttgart away in the final group game, and it seems as though they've just somehow, whether it's the return of Dembele, suddenly become this great team to watch. So, what happened? What made it click?
I mean, you were very mean on that night at Arsenal. I remember, really, really mean and so negative, which you never are really negative.
Constructive.
Constructive. No, it's a good point because you're right. That night at the Emirates, and I think James was maybe there too with us. It was just like there was no competition. Like they could not keep up really with Arsenal, a really good Arsenal team at the time with no injuries. And they struggled, especially without Dembele. I think the Luis Enrique methods takes a little bit of time to start with. It's quite complicated what you have to do with the ball, without the ball in terms of movement. For Vitinha to go back to the form that he had last season after long Euros, I think took a bit of time too. And then you needed the likes of Barcola or Doué. Doué started at Arsenal that night and was really, it didn't look right for him. So those kind of players had to step up too. Hakimi and Nuno Mendes, those kind of players. And I think as the collective was improving, and you could see the improvement, and yes, sometimes they didn't get the result they deserved, like against Atletico Madrid, where they had a lot of chances and just could not score. But collectively, it was not too bad. You start to see the structure of it and the movement. And then I think players stepped up. Dembele, especially the turnaround in Dembele is actually quite incredible. Vitinha and Joe Neves, even Fabian Ruiz to bring a bit of balance to it. Barcola, the arrival of Kvaratskhelia in January was big too. And even defensively, they seem to find a little bit of solidity with William Pacho being really good since he came from the Bundesliga. So I think it was just a question of maybe wait a little bit, be a bit patient, and for Luis Enrique to be able to mold that squad like he wanted.
Jules, can I just ask, in terms of the direction of the project, and it's been quite abrupt, hasn't it, going from kind of these huge names, some of the best players in the world, to kind of a more maybe more joined up thinking in terms of recruitment. How have the fans reacted to that? Was it something that was driven by the fans? Were the fans getting sick of that kind of big ego, big name dressing room that they had seen and wanted a change of direction? Or has it been a little bit more forced? Because I know fans of football clubs want to see the best players in the world, but are they behind what PSG have done in terms of the project?
Yeah, it's a great question, Rob. I think the start was like a lot of the fans could see this hasn't worked. Even I don't want to blame Messi. It's not a blaming game anyway. But before Messi arrived, they just done semi-final of the Champions League. Then Messi is there with Neymar and Mbappe, and you get knocked out twice in the last 16. So okay, there's a draw, and different form. Like it was the final is the pandemic year, of course, things like that. So I can understand that. But really, fans were like, okay, this is great. And it's wonderful to see Messi. My children can say they saw Messi in a PSG shirt at the Parc des Princes. Wonderful. But it was just not working. So I don't think it was sustainable. And I don't think it was worth continuing like that. So I think the fans went on board, let's try something different. And really, this team is far more likable, even to Mark Ogden, than any of the PSG teams before, And this is as well the idea here. A lot of people have come to me and said, okay, before you were just a sum of individuals. You tried to add an addition of big names just because you could afford them because your owners are so rich. But that was not a team, really. There was nothing to like about that team. Now is very different, and I think that's credit to Luis Enrique, to the players, to the club. It's only year one of this project, so in a way they're a little bit ahead of schedule too for where they wanted to be at the start of the season. But I think the fact that you might sell a little bit less shirts for sure, and less and get less money in terms of sponsors, but at least people like you all around the world, not just in Paris.
It seems from the outside as well that there was a bit of a mentality issue at PSG, particularly in the Champions League. We think about the way that they went out. They didn't, despite having all those big names sort of year on year, or more often than not anyway, they seem to go out and lacking that kind of, I don't know, that sort of guile, that composure, that sort of maturity that you expect to the very top sides in the knockout competitions. And yet this season, they seem to be a lot more assured, despite the fact that it's a much younger squad overall. Have you seen that change? And if so, how has it come about so quickly?
Yeah, there's a couple of things. The first one, you're right on the mentality. I mean, I don't know if you saw the clip from the Luis Enrique documentary that he did about, not him, about himself, but it was about him, where last season he spoke to Kylian Mbappe in the video analysis room at the PSG training ground, and it's the famous sentence like, you have to defend. I need you to defend. Like Michael Jordan was the best player in the history of probably of basketball. Even superstars defend, and Kylian never really wanted to defend. He doesn't still want to defend now. And I think Luis Enrique was like, we can't go anywhere if this team doesn't attack together and doesn't defend together. And another thing that shows that lack of, you're right, mentality, but also, I guess, toughness in many ways. They didn't used to run that much, let's be honest. And I think the season before last, they averaged 108K per game in the Champions League, which is ridiculous, really, when you think about it. Like, you're hardly not running as a team. Last season was a little bit better, but again, you had Neymar and Mbappe who didn't want to defend and didn't want to run, didn't want to track back. This year, they're one of the highest. It's 120, 121 at times, which is a massive difference. Running 12 kilometers more as a team in a Champions League game makes a big difference because the pressing, especially, and the counter pressing are so efficient. And that's another side of it. But without the mentality, you're right, you don't get to those numbers. You don't get the players to do the same things together. We attack and we defend together. We try to recover the ball all together. And that had to change. And I know it's a bit easy and simple to say, well, the big stars are out, so now it's more of a team because the mentality is right. But in a way, it is the truth.
The one thing is they are a team. They're developing as a team. But I don't want to kind of put a bit of negativity on it, Jules, as you know. But as we've spoken about this before, that playing for PSG is great for a certain period of time. But these players like Mbappe want to play in the Premier League, in La Liga. So how long can they keep the Zaire Emery's, the Ruben Neves, the João Neves, and keep them at the club? Because they have got bigger challenges to achieve elsewhere.
Yeah,
Liga
you're right.
Is it?
No, you're right, absolutely. But the good thing is when you sign them at 19 or 20, then obviously it gives you maybe a bit more time than if you sign them at 25 and they have 2 years with you and they said, oh, wow, I'm 27, Real Madrid are coming here for me now. I have to take it because I've got 3, 4, maybe 5 years maximum left in my career. If you sign them at 19, like João Neves can give you really 5 really good years. Then he's 24. He can go to Barcelona or to Real Madrid or to Manchester United or Liverpool or wherever he wants, because he's still only 24. So I think that's part of the idea. If you can keep this squad together for 3 years, I think in year 3 of this project, they would be very, very good. You look at the progress they've made this season, we said, with the ball, without the ball. The Liverpool game, especially the first leg, was, I think, the big indication of how they just didn't let Liverpool play at all. And that's where they want to be regularly, especially in the Champions League. So it will come. At some point, they will leave. I think Vitinha is very soon will be one of the best in the world in this position, if he's not already, and will go to something bigger. Neves probably is the same. Nuno Mendes, I think, probably likely. What about Kvaratskhelia, even Barcola? So yeah, you're right. At some point they will go, but I guess you start again the process. But at least they've got 3 really good years coming up.
You say that though, but if PSG in their new project, in their new form, are consistently challenging for the Champions League, I know that League One hasn't probably got the reputation of the Premier League or La Liga, which is fine. But if you're part of a team as a young player that's consistently challenging for the Champions League again and again and again, there's an awful lot of reasons to stay. I mean, it's almost similar to Erling Haaland at City. The expectation at one point was that Haaland would go to City and then eventually go to Barcelona or Real Madrid, but he's so happy there that he's going to stay for the next 10 years. There is a possibility that these young players may think, I'm so comfortable, I'm just going to stay where I am.
Yeah, you're right. And obviously the wages are on par with Premier League wages. So it's not like if they were on little money and then there was that as well to compete with, because the wages that they're all on is really, really comfortable. Like, again, Premier League wages, more or less. So yeah, you're right. That's another argument. But then there's also the level of the league, which is true. If you're Vitinha and João Neves, I think the Premier League or La Liga is something that you would probably love to be part of at some point. So we will see. But I think Luis Enrique is such an inspiring coach. And yeah, at times there have been tensions, a few fights with Dembele. That's why he was dropped for the Arsenal game. But he's also super inspiring. And at some point he will leave. And whoever comes after, if he's the same pedigree, then I guess there will be another attraction to stay for a bit longer.
Well, the big question then, Jules, is obviously they've never won it. They're favourites to win it now, according to the bookmakers. Are they going to win it?
I don't know. I remember with Olley having the conversation. I still think they, as good as the midfield has been against Liverpool, let's take those 2 games because they were really outstanding. I still think they lack a bit of physicality for Neves and Vitinha, for sure. Yeah, you can have a lot of the ball and move the ball well and be press resistant, which is going to be very, very important going forward against Villa, although I think Villa are not going to press much, but sit back quite a lot. But we see what happens in those 2 games, but maybe after that and maybe late in the final or something. I still think you need a bit of physicality, maybe even a bit more of experience. That really only Marquinhos. There's no player in the whole squad over 30, for example. Ruiz and Marquinhos are the 2 oldest ones, but you can't really say that they're that experienced either in terms of Champions League pedigree. So maybe experience will, at some point, hurt them, the lack of experience. So we'll see. I mean, Aston Villa, they should be favourites slightly. I think they are. And then what if it's Real Madrid? And then what if it's Bayern or Inter or Barcelona in the final? We would not be favourite. So there's a long way to go. And remember last season, it looked, after knocking out Barcelona in the quarterfinals, it was Borussia Dortmund and everybody said, they're already in the final. And then we saw what happened. So even Villa, I don't think is a given. But if you go past Villa, after that, it's still some massive teams, bigger teams than you, and teams that have won this or have reached the final more recently than you. So we'll see. But I like the fact in a way that, maybe the bookies can say they're favorite. I don't think the players see like that. I don't think Luis Enrique see like that. But they also know that nobody really wants to play against them. So it's a good position to be in.
Jules, I can't believe you're being so cautious. I thought you were going to be fully on the bandwagon.
You're just trying to jinx me. That's all you're trying to do, all of you.
Jules, just on a broader question. So PSG have only won 1 European trophy, it's the Cup Winners' Cup in 95-96. Marseille are the only French club to win the Champions League. That was 93. How can a country that produces so many players as France only have won 2 European trophies? It's crazy. 2 European trophies ever.
Yeah, there's a lot of finals lost back in the old days, in the 50s and the 60s, but even more recently, Europa League, Champions League final with PSG in 2019, where really, if you think about it, in 2020, where if it turns differently, they win that game against Bayern. Mbappe has this massive chance at 0-0 just before the break, and then they lose 1-0. So maybe there's a lack of that winning mentality that French clubs don't really have before. I don't know. There's also the fact that we just a seller league. I know PSG is slightly different, but we are still a seller league. So great academy, great young players. You produce them. Really good signing at times. We've got really good scouts in France that get good young players, like, I don't know, the likes of Osimhen or people like that. But then they leave very early too, to go to bigger clubs, more money, etc., etc. So I think that's hurting the league too, and that's hurting the French team then in Europe to be able to compete. So we'll see, but there might be better days ahead, I think, with this PSG project. Potentially Marseille, if they keep the Zerbi and they're investing the money. Monaco are good, Lille are good. It's been a good, really, campaign in Europe for French clubs overall. Lyon will give a good game to United as well in the quarterfinals of the Europa League. So it's there. It's not far. You feel it's not far, but you're right. It hasn't been good enough overall.
So anyway, Jules, we'll see each other in Paris on Wednesday, when only one team will have a star.
You love Paris so much. You love French people.
Only one team at that game will have a star on the badge, and it's not PSG.
Don't settle for that, Jules.
I know.
Don't settle for that.
I'll welcome you anyway. Don't worry.
Okay, so after the break, we'll have our German expert, Archie Rhind-Tutt, who's been speaking to Harry Kane about his time at Bayern Munich.
Well, Bayern Munich are 6 points ahead of Bayer Leverkusen in the Bundesliga with 6 games to go. Winning the Bundesliga would mark the end of Harry Kane's personal trophy drought. This weekend, they face Borussia Dortmund in their Classico, which you can watch on ESPN and ESPN Plus in the United States on Saturday from 12 p.m. ET. We're joined from Germany by Archie Rhind-Tutt, who sat down with Harry Kane before a pivotal time in Bayern Munich's season. We'll hear from you and Harry shortly, Archie. But firstly, how was he as an interview?
I think he was as he always is, which is ultra professional. And sometimes you're wondering, okay, what am I having to try and interpret out of what he's saying here? Because he is always so on top of the message that he wants to get across. And yet I still think there were a few things that came out of it that were quite interesting. I'd say it's a little bit like your mobile phone contract. You've got to read the fine print and you go, oh, okay, that's what this means. Right. But no, as ever, a very personable fella, and happy enough to take the time, which not everybody is. It should be said, and particularly what I like is just how he's always stepping up to try and take responsibility, no matter what the scenario is. So yeah, I thought he came across as he always does, which is quite well.
Well, Archie says there's some interesting bits in this. We'll obviously be the judge of that. So let's hear what he had to say.
If you took a step back, how would you analyse your career so far?
Yeah, pretty good, to be honest. I've done a lot of things I've wanted to do in my career so far. Of course, I know the team trophy is the one that everyone will refer back to, but ultimately, you have to do your best in every situation, and I feel like I've done that. From when I set out, it was always about how consistent I could be. I looked at the greats of the game and what made them great, and it wasn't just doing it in spells, it was doing it year after year, and that was a big drive of mine, to be able to consistently be one of the best players in the world. And that drive will be with me until the end of my career. Whether I finish with 1 trophy or 20 trophies, ultimately it won't change my mindset in what I want to achieve and how I try and achieve it. Like I said, we have another opportunity this year to win some trophies, and that would be incredible, and maybe that would stop that noise around me a little bit. But I think in football in general, you're always going to have people who doubt you, people who criticise you. The most important thing is that you know what you're trying to achieve. Your teammates respect you for how you work, and the club respects you, and the fans respect you, and that's ultimately who I care about.
When it comes to the adventure that you've been on here, is there any part of you that thinks one day I'd still like to go back home?
I'm not sure. I've said throughout my whole career, I'm not someone who likes to think too far ahead. I'm extremely happy here. I think We have a fantastic team, fantastic coaching staff. And I just feel like, whilst I feel like I'm in the best condition, I want to play at the highest level possible. And this is as high as it gets. So I know a lot can change in football in a short space of time and things can happen. But ultimately, my focus is here. I'm not thinking about any other league or any other team. And with football, I like to just go with the flow. And at the moment, the flow is here at Bayern Munich.
So we can put to bed any of those stories that I've seen of something in the summer.
A few random stories out there for sure, yeah. So I don't know where they come from, but for sure I'm happy here at Bayern Munich.
Just dealing with the criticism that comes your way. From the outside, to me, it feels unfair in that it feels like whatever you haven't done seems to get levelled at you more than what you have done. How do you deal with that on a personal level? Because I guess on one point, no one will be more critical of yourself than you. How is that?
Yeah, so that's kind of the summary, really. I know when I've played good. I know when I've played bad. I know when I'm helping the team in ways, even when I'm not scoring, etc. I know, there's a lot of people out there who, talk about football and commentate on football, or do stuff on football who don't really understand football that much. So, I know there's been games where I've scored and not played great, and I've been spoke about in this high light. And there's been games where I haven't scored and been one of the best players on the pitch, and this spoke about how you weren't that good. So it's like it comes with it. Ultimately, I know the things I need to improve on. I know when I've done well and not. Having people who critique you is part of the game, is part of life. It's how you let it affect you, which is the difference. And ultimately, I said earlier, it motivates me to be even better. And look, when it's all said and done, when I look back on my career, I just want to make sure I've done everything possible to be the best I can be. And ultimately, the opinions of a lot of people just don't matter.
And you spoke about not getting too high, not getting too low. Is it a relief to kind of get away from that mentality that we have in England, where it seems to be build them up, then knock them down?
Yeah, I don't think it's just in England, though. I think it's everywhere. Me, for example, this season, I went a few games without scoring, and there's a big crisis talk. I scored a couple against Leverkusen, and this Ballon d'Or talk. So it's like this the high and the low is too far. And I think it's important for young players to understand that, not to get carried away with it, because it's literally game by game. People can judge your whole season in a different way. So that's kind of where football is, just because of all the platforms and all the talk about it. And to be honest, it's probably only going to get more and more as we go. So, but that's where you need to have the right people around you to know what's important. The right coaches to say, no, you need to work on this and work on that, and not get carried away. You can use the good moments as confidence builders, and when people are talking well about you, it's nice to use that as confidence, but then don't let that get carried away into being complacent. And then when people ain't talking great about you, you can use that as fuel and motivation, and as long as it don't then become self-doubt, etc., then there's always a balance to it. And that's just the part of life that you have to try and figure out.
Wait, so I shouldn't push Harry Kane for Ballon d'Or then?
You can carry on.
Okay,
I mean, I've scored a few goals since, and the conversations have carried on. But again, with all those conversations, ultimately that's going to come down to who wins the biggest trophies at the end of the season. So a lot of it's kind of irrelevant until we kind of get to May and then the Club World Cup. So, but no, you can keep talking about it. I have no issue with that, but I'm just kind of setting it as an example.
Archie, there's a lot of people who talk about football or who comment on football or do stuff with football who don't really understand football that much. Now, aside from using the word football 4 times in the same sentence, what do you make of that from Harry Kane? Do you think that's a little bit of an admission that maybe some of the criticism that he's had, and I'm thinking, I suppose I'm going back to maybe the Euros when he kind of had that almost in every game when he was playing for England, but maybe also that if he's had some of that in Germany, that he is aware of it and that it is maybe getting to him a little bit.
So I had an interview with him before this where in the space of one answer, he went from saying that, you know, he was aware of the noise around him to then in the next answer being like, but I don't listen to what they're saying. And I think this tells you something, which is that he is always trying to shut out that noise, but that's an admission that it does always get through to him in some way. And I understand why, because he is one of the greatest English players of all time. And does he get that respect back home? Probably not. And yet in Germany, there's not this same consistent talk about, well, where's your trophy, mate? Which seems to surround him in England, and as if he needs it to legitimize his status. So I can understand why it gets under his skin when few players have achieved the goal tally that he has in his career at both club and international level. And he's also at international level gone closer to lifting a major trophy than many others before him. So yeah, I understand where he's coming from, but I find it interesting that it does actually get through to him, because I think that such as you could hear it with the tone that he deals with things there. He deals with things on such a steady tone, and yet obviously behind the scenes, it does affect him on some level.
Archie, do you not think he's overthinking it a bit? Because I have to say, I don't think there's any disrespect for Harry Kane in this country. And I think the fact that he hasn't won a trophy, yes, that is used as I won't say a stick to beat him with, because that's probably too far. But there were chances for him to leave Tottenham, and he stuck around. He probably made a mistake by signing such a long contract when he did. That kind of denied him the opportunity to leave. But obviously, when Man City came in 2 or 3 years ago, he would have gone there had he been able to. But Tottenham held out. I get the sense with Harry Kane sometimes that it's almost like trying to convince himself that he's had a good career. We know he's had a great career, but he will win a trophy in Germany this season. But I do think that he's making more of it than anybody else is, because if he wins the Bundesliga, he will have solved that problem. But then I still reckon there'll be something deep down thinking, I want to win the Premier League, I want to win the Champions League. So one might not be enough. He's too good a player, too great a player not to win anything. But it's like the Alan Shearer situation, isn't it? He went to Newcastle, never won the trophy after winning the league with Blackburn. So some players do that, but I do think that there's not really conversations going on about Harry Kane not being a great player. He's England's all-time leading scorer by a million miles. So on that basis, how important is it, do you think, to him and in reality that he wins a trophy with Bayern this season?
I think very important. He just wants to shut out that noise, which is probably more online than anything, and yet is still making its way through to him. That I think is the thing he knows that he can do. But also, when I was summing up the way that I thought it must come across to him, he was prepared to sign on to that statement and say, yeah, this is how it is, and how he is most critical of himself. And I think that also because he's probably watched it, how players who are infinitely less talented and proven than him have picked up winners' medals, and he thinks, well, when's my day going to come? He's been in the infinite bridesmaids role through his career. I mean, what a bridesmaid! But at the same time, I think that it's difficult for him to compute that. How can I be this good, and also how selfless he is to the team in terms of the work that he puts in. I look at the Bayern team that he's playing in right now, and it's not like he's just hanging around in the box and nodding them in. That he is putting in all the work. One scene comes to mind in the Champions League against Leverkusen, where he's helping back and putting in sliding tackles and putting his body on the line. Very important player for them defensively at corners in terms of his aerial prowess as well. And yeah, I think as a player, you're also going to be looking at, okay, well, what haven't I done? When you are, again, on the talented plane that he is, I think it's just quite a normal and human way to respond, in all honesty.
I thought it's quite telling in that interview that where he starts talking about maybe some of the kind of the commentary around his performances, that he talks specifically about games where he thinks he's done quite well but hasn't scored, and then all the games where he has scored and hasn't done quite as well. And it's becoming a bit of a common theme that among some of the players. There was an interview that we did with Jack Grealish, so this time last year, where he said the same thing, that you can be almost anonymous in a game and have 2 tap-ins at a back post, and all of a sudden people are talking about you in this kind of, man of the match performances. And in other games where you've been really involved, you've kind of made the team tick, you've played really well, you're kind of happy with your own performance, but you haven't, played that final pass to get the assist, or maybe not got that shot off to get the goal, and all of a sudden people are talking about your numbers. Just in regard to that, how is Harry Kane kind of been viewed in Germany? Because he went to Bayern for an awful lot of money. It would have been very, very easy for him to have kind of failed. But what is it, 44 goals last season, 34 this season? I mean, he's done everything that he was meant to do, right? Just from a personal point of view.
Yeah, and if you chip in the assists on top of that, then it's under €1 million per goal involvement, and
Nothing.
that was the talk in Germany at the time when he arrived. It was, okay, this is a lot of money, though. Is he going to be worth it? And I don't think anybody in Germany would now say no. Even though he is yet to touch silverware, there is. He has garnered the respect of everyone here, and is a very feared striker, as you would expect.
How does he compare to Lewandowski, Archie? In terms of, obviously, Lewandowski won a lot more in Germany than Harry's won yet, and it was over a longer period of time. But in the short space of time he's been there, he's probably matched Lewandowski in terms of goals per game, or even outstripped him.
He hasn't got the big record that Lewandowski broke in a season of Gerd Müller, which was 41. But I think in terms of the Bayern dynamics of it, Lewandowski was dragging his heels towards the end of his time there about not getting the respect that he thinks he deserved. And I think at Bayern as well, in that dressing room, he had a tendency to drag the mood down a little bit. And Harry Kane is not that. He is somebody who is coming in, doing his job, and has a different focus to him. Robert Lewandowski was a stunning player for Bayern Munich and gave a lot to the club. But I think just part of Robert Lewandowski's thinking was, am I being truly appreciated here for actually what I've done at this club? And I think that started to rankle with him, and ended up in the move to Barcelona. He wanted a move to Real Madrid before that, quite famously. But yeah, Harry Kane is having to face the same questions that Robert Lewandowski had to, about, is he contributing enough in big games? And the thing is that Harry Kane's been able to come back, actually, and say, look, I've scored in all these games. And the thing is, as well, at Bayern, sometimes before what looks like a big game, there'll be this talk of, okay, well, can he do it? And then Bayern will win so comfortably in that game that it gets written off as, it's like, that doesn't count, though. Which is a bit unfair. Whereas if it's a big game, say for a smaller club, then it remains a big game. Whereas at Bayern, the terms of the agreement then change depending on how comfortably you win. And I think that's something that Harry Kane has found out. Overall, I think that, he's on a similar level to Lewandowski. Without the end to this season, I don't think it's possible to make a final judgment. And we know there's going to be another season after that. I would then wonder if Harry Kane says, Germany, mission accomplished, because he will, by that stage, be entering his mid-30s. And as James knows, there are ambitions outside of football as well that he might still be looking at. And as you've mentioned, in the Premier League, does he still have a look at Alan Shearer's record? And having enough time in between, having been in the Premier League, I think as well, would create a certain acceptance of him going elsewhere. It's just a question of where could he possibly go?
Well, let's come on to that. I mean, just before we do, just one point I wanted to add in was that just on the criticism. I mean, I've interviewed Harry one-on-one a few times. I've spoken to him a lot, covering England down the years and the Spurs, and I understand the sort of build them up, knock them down mentality, but he's always been an exception to that, in that he has quite openly said, I judge myself against Cristiano Ronaldo, Lionel Messi. That's where I want to be. If you look at the Amazon documentary, the Tottenham All or Nothing, he's in a meeting with Jose Mourinho, literally saying, I want to be judged on that level. I want to be in that conversation with those players. So I do think, and as admirable as that is, and I do think Kane gets a lot of unfair criticism, if you're going to put yourself on that pedestal yourself, you are kind of inviting, I think, a little bit more criticism than maybe you would do otherwise. But in terms of his next move, I mean, you're right. He has aspirations to be a kicker in the NFL. When he's spoken about that previously, he's talked about if he ever does do it, he doesn't want to do it sort of as a real afterthought, when he's in his 40s and he's, sort of physically in decline. That would sort of suggest that maybe a few years before that, maybe towards his late 30s. I mean, what is he, 32 this summer? Just before we get into moving back to England, Archie, do you get any sense at all that Bayern are starting to succession plan? And the name I think of is Benjamin Sesko, specifically with that. Or is there anyone else? Do you think Sesko's a serious option for Bayern? Or do you think there's anyone else that they are starting to look at of that kind of age group to think, life beyond Kane?
There's been talk of there needs to be a true backup to Kane in the squad. That's started to come through more this season. And Šeško is a name that has been mentioned, albeit I look at him at RB Leipzig now and there is still some development to be done with him. There are still some steps forward that he needs to make, as much as he is a striker of fine potential and can do some outrageous things. He's not ready yet. I'm just thinking of other options right now in the Bundesliga. There was talk about Jonathan Burkhardt, who's had an excellent season with Mainz, who is also in his early 20s and is starting to prove himself. I think it's a little bit too early again for him as well, but there is no one-to-one in terms of replacement out there on the reputation level. I think Bayern will, like, the biggest signing that they want to make next is Florian Wirtz. That is the worst kept secret in German football, and that is also the question now with Thomas Muller retiring, and that taking over all the headlines in Germany. I think that's where eyes will move to next. But yeah, I think it is certainly in the back of Bayern's minds right now, but somewhere on the agenda that Harry Kane will need replacing. His contract is up in 2027, which is not too long, and you would think that Bayern would still want to, if they can, and because of Harry Kane's quality and what he promises in terms of goals, he will still demand a fee. So next summer, 1 year left on the deal, that it looks like would be the most likely time, I think.
Just before we get to what it goes next, I just want to kind of go back on what you said about Messi and Ronaldo and how Harry Kane measures himself against those two. I think a word that Archie used maybe 10 minutes ago when he said that Harry Kane is a selfless player. I think that is to his credit, but it's also maybe to his downfall in the sense that Cristiano Ronaldo is the most ruthless player I've ever known. And Messi is also on the pitch ruthless as well. And I think had Harry Kane really wanted to match those two, he'd have left Tottenham 5 years ago. I think he'd have shown more ruthlessness, and that it can be too much of a nice guy at times. We see it when he speaks. He's a perfect ambassador for Bayern, for England. But I think if he wanted to be measured alongside Ronaldo and Messi, he should have left Tottenham. He might have won more trophies by now. Had he gone to Man City the year before they signed Haaland, I mean, we're talking about a sliding doors moment here, aren't we? But had Kane gone to City before Haaland, would they have needed Haaland? I think Harry Kane would have scored as many goals for Man City as Erling Haaland, and he could have won a treble. He's a better player than Erling Haaland. He's a better striker than Erling Haaland. But by not pushing through the move, he didn't show that ruthlessness that has made Messi and Ronaldo the great players they are. Anyway, back to the talk of next season or the year after that. When he does return to Premier League, if he does, where's the best option for him?
Well, we need to just state that there is a release clause in his contract at Bayern, which becomes active in January. It's about 65 million euros. I've had that confirmed to me by sources close to the player. My instinct says that Liverpool would be a fit for him. And I don't know, I don't base that on any information. I don't know if Liverpool would have any interest in him. But I think there's going to be some sort of striker merry-go-round this summer. With a lot of talk about Isak, Gyökeres, a number of players, Osimhen maybe. There's a lot of players, Sesko, another one. all of these forwards who could move, and there's a domino effect in place. I think if one of them goes, then 2 or 3 will probably follow. And for me, I just think Kane would be, it would be much easier for Kane, for the Tottenham sort of element to swallow it. I think if he went to Liverpool, he'd slot straight into that team, proven, no issues at all, obviously, about adapting to the Premier League and understanding what the demands would be. An absolute player who straight away would solve their number 9 problem. And
are you thinking this summer, though, next summer? What's your timescale on
that? From what Archie's interview, from what he said in that interview, it sounds like he's not going to go anywhere this summer. But I do wonder if Liverpool put the money on the table. And the thing about a release clause, okay, it's not active until January, but what it does is effectively set the market price, because in sort of 4 or 5 months' time, he's going to be worth this. So it then becomes a lot easier to negotiate. Well, what is he worth now? Because there's a fixed point in the future where you know what his price is going to be. So, if we say, let's speculate, if we said 80 million euros.
Well, Bill did report this summer, didn't it? Bill reported that, although you're right about the clause next January, there's an 80 million euro clause this summer. So according to Bill, we don't know if that's right. I'm not sure if you guys have got any steer on that, but if it is 80 million, that's around 65 million pounds. I take your point about Liverpool, but they've got a situation with Mo Salah right now, same sort of age, and they're haggling over a contract. Do any club these days go for players in their 30s? That's the problem against these great players. So many clubs now are obsessed with signing players who are 22, 23, 24, that it's going to take a club to kind of break their model to sign a Harry Kane, even though you think he'd be guaranteed goals.
And that's it. And it's something that's happened with PSR that clubs, I think clubs are far more reluctant now to invest big money in players who are over the age of 30. You think about what United did with Van Persie, kind of that last piece of the puzzle to win them a Premier League title. I just think that clubs at the moment are far more reluctant to kind of invest in that type of player, compared to the way they were maybe sort of 10 years ago. And you're right, Oggy, that clubs seem more desperate to invest in younger players who they may get sort of 6, 7, 8 years out of, because they know in terms of PSR that if it works out, then they're kind of in the clear. Whereas, do you genuinely think of a Premier League team who would invest 65 million euros in Harry Kane, as good as he is, but at that age, knowing that you're probably not going to get anything back for him?
I mean, Man United would have done that deal.
They would, yeah. And they should have, in fairness to him. They should have, when they signed Højlund. They should have pushed the boat out. But now he's 2 years down the line.
2 years ago. It's 2 years difference, isn't it? And if Mo Salah was to leave Liverpool this year at the same age as Harry Kane and they replaced him with Harry Kane, that wouldn't go down very well at Anfield, believe me. The fans would be pretty mad at that, because Mo Salah's, an amazing player. So, and you could say that Salah's not had the injuries that Harry Kane's had. So I just don't see him at Liverpool on that basis. That goals-wise, yes, but in terms of age profile, wages, doesn't fit with the clubs these days. The days, like Rob says, I really can't think of any club. PSG are out of the market as well for these older players. They're going a different route. So many clubs. I mean, you're looking at Real Madrid, but they don't need a Harry Kane. So he may have to see his contract out at Bayern Munich. And what will he be then, 34?
Yeah, I can't see... I mean, Manchester United are looking elsewhere. You can't see him going to Arsenal. Obviously City aren't going to sign another forward like that. So I mean, the only other one I suppose is Chelsea. And I think it was interesting that when he circulated that he wanted to go a couple of years before he left to go to Bayern, he was privately, I was told he was open to going to Chelsea, even though it would have been a very acrimonious move. Tottenham and Chelsea, big London rivals. Look, I mean, Todd Bowley back then was kind of calling the shots a lot more than he is now, and he was trying to push Thomas Tuchel when he was manager to sign Ronaldo. So, although they have this, model of signing players on long contracts at a younger age, I do wonder whether maybe Chelsea could be an option for him. But again, PSR concerns, the fact that Bowley's not really calling the shots as much as he was there. Clear Lake have kind of taken over the sort of more day-to-day running of the club, sort of suggests that maybe Chelsea are not even an option for him. But I don't know. If it's just something always natural Liverpool thing.
You put it out there. I was surprised you even mentioned Arsenal, even considered it. And I wouldn't have thought that is ever a goer. But Sol Campbell made the move. Arsenal need a striker. Harry Kane wants to win the Premier League. I mean, how the percentage-wise from 1 to 100, what we're talking about Harry Kane to Arsenal?
Well, I mean, they need a centre forward. Arsenal, they're in the market for one. He was a boyhood fan. I mean, I'm sat, just for those who were watching this on YouTube, I'm not being held by police. I am actually sat in the London Colney Arsenal training ground interpreter's room. That's actually where I am at the moment. So I don't know whether maybe I'm influenced by being here, thinking it might have more legs than it should do. If you want to put a number on it, I'd say 10%, but I feel that's generous.
10%. Okay. 1 in 10.
No chance.
I'll go with that. 1 in 10.
Chance.
No, I agree. But, over our time doing this job, we've seen lots of strange transfers. Sol Campbell to Arsenal, Carlos Tevez to Manchester City, Luis Figo to Real Madrid. I think with that, we're talking that level, aren't we? If Harry Kane was even considering going to Arsenal, it's in that league. And I agree. I don't think it's possible. But, strange things happen. Arsenal is a striker. He wants to win the Premier League. Tottenham, well, we'll see.
You've got that mischievous grin on your face.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is very mischievous, isn't it? I don't think it'll happen.
The man's literally told you, Archie, that he doesn't want to go anywhere and he's very happy at Bayern. So perhaps we should probably respect that. I mean, do you think there's any chance that, from a kind of financial point of view, if a club, let's say whether that release clause exists or not, if someone came with 80 million for Harry Kane this summer, do you think Bayern would seriously consider selling it?
I think the thought would go through their head, and I think that they would ultimately relent, because what makes me think that they would think about it has been the amount of chatter in Munich this season about, well, we need to be saving money. And this has been the whole thing with Thomas Müller, a player who is an icon and definitely in the top 5 Bayern players of all time, that he's leaving at the end of the season. And they've said it's not a financial thing, it's a sporting thing. But I think it plays a role when Thomas Müller is earning up to a reported 20 million euros a year still. And the thing is, well, you think Harry Kane is on 25, reportedly, alongside Jamal Musiala. And if Bayern are wanting to plan for the future and get somebody else in, then Harry Kane's wage will be one that they would look to get off. But the thing is that he's so valuable to this team right now and to the way that they play, that I don't know whether Bayern would be ready to part with him unless Florian Wirtz was at the club. And I don't know if enough dominoes would fall in between that happening. So I still think it's very unlikely. And the way that Harry Kane has put it as well is that it's not something that he's actively chasing either right now.
All right, Archie. Well, thanks for joining us. Time for one more break now. But when we come back, we'll be discussing Manchester United's goal-scoring targets in the summer transfer window. Well, as it turns out, the Manchester derby was the perfect opportunity for a Sunday afternoon nap. Both teams looked pretty toothless, but that's been a season-long problem for Manchester United in particular. Ruben Amorim's side sit 13th in the table, but they're even lower on 15th in goals scored, which is 37 from 31 Premier League games. So, Mark, it's obviously top of their shopping list this summer. Who have they identified and why?
Well, as we know that United haven't got a lot of money to spend, but they probably have a little bit more than people expect. But within that, they've got a couple of priorities. They definitely want a striker, maybe a midfielder and a wing-back. But the striker's the number one priority because, like you say, that the goal situation is pretty dire. They're going to have to score 17 goals in the last 7 games to match their worst ever Premier League total of 54. So that's how bad they've been. Rob and I were sat at Old Trafford on Sunday watching Rasmus Højlund do his best to impersonate a competition winner that's won the chance to play for Man United because he was, just not very good. Joshua Zirkzee is the same. So I've been told that they've identified Liam Delap as the favoured target for a variety of reasons. One, he's had a great season in the Premier League and he's got real potential. He's 22, so he's a good age profile. But he's also available for around £40 million if Ipswich get relegated. So that looks pretty likely. It'd be a lot cheaper than Victor Gyökeres at Sporting Lisbon, who obviously has got a relationship with Ruben Amorim. Benjamin Sesko, as we know, has got interest from elsewhere. Arsenal, Bayern Munich, other clubs that could offer Champions League football are in the running for Sesko. Victor Osimhen is another target, but there are question marks over Sesko, over Osimhen, and over Gyökeres in terms of, could he provide value for money at 26, having already had a chance in the English division? with Coventry back a couple of years ago. So Delap is the guy that they favour. There is a situation in Man City whereby City have a £40 million buyback option, but I've been told they're not going to trigger that, or unlikely to trigger that, because Erling Haaland signed a 9.5-year contract in January. So if they were going to sign Delap back, they would have to give him a substantial contract to do so, and then it wouldn't be a case of signing him and selling him for £80 million. It doesn't work like that. They'd have to pay up his contract. So City also benefit from a 20% sell-on clause of any profit. So Delap fits a lot of options for United, and also we know that Chelsea are interested, but in terms of what United have got to spend, what they're looking at, the profile that Amorim wants, Delap is a player that fits the bill.
I mean, the question for both of you, I'll come to you, Rob, maybe with this first. I mean, it's obvious that United needs more firepower. But a number 9 isn't necessarily a panacea, is it? I mean, this is not exactly a team that's creating chance after chance and is just lacking a centre forward to put them away. I mean, the problems are more fundamental than that, aren't they? They can't just think they're going to get a number 9 and everything will be rosy in the garden.
And that is the danger. The lack of goals is an issue that predates Amorim. It was an issue for Eric Ten Hag, particularly even before Eric Ten Hag. I mean, just looking at the stats in the last sort of 3 years, they average around sort of 58 league goals a season, which for a supposed top level team is just nowhere near when you think of the likes of City and Liverpool regularly sort of topping or getting close to 100 league goals every season. It's nowhere near, and you're right. It's not necessarily an issue that United are creating all of these chances and they just haven't got anyone to put the ball in the net. That is part of it, and United strikers do miss a lot of chances. I mean, just watching the game on Sunday, United probably have had the chances to win the game. Thinks of the one that falls to Garnacho, and Dorgu has one. So there are chances that are being created. But it's not necessarily just the final piece of the puzzle, and it's interesting. I was on this pod a couple of weeks ago talking about that the transfer room forum in Berlin. One of the agents who is representing a striker who it looks like he's going to move in the summer was there and was talking about Man United, and he said he would be reluctant to take his player to Man United at the moment because it's a really difficult place for players to thrive at the moment, particularly centre forwards, and the danger is that you end up being someone like a Rasmus Højlund or a Joshua Zirkzee. Now, Rasmus Højlund at the time was probably one of the brightest young prospects in Europe at the time. Now, United, admittedly, even themselves admit that they've overpaid for him. But he's been at United now for 2 years. And if there was a situation where another centre-forward comes in at Man United in the summer, you're looking at Rasmus Højlund possibly moving on for an absolute fraction of the price that he joined United for, with his reputation completely in bits. And that is a danger. That is a danger for players that come to Man United at the moment.
I don't think they'd move him on. I think he would be a second choice striker, which they need. They need the numbers. They couldn't just bring in Delap and offload the forwards. But I think it's about more than just goals. I think you're right. A goal scorer won't solve the problem. It's about having a centre forward who can play as a centre forward. Who can hold the ball up. Who can, when you watch United at the moment, the ball comes straight back. Now the Højlund or Zirkzee can hold the ball up, which means that the defence and midfielders are under constant pressure, which is why they can't dominate games. They concede so many goals. If you had a striker like Delap who can hold the ball up, or he can turn his man, or he can lay the ball off to his wingers, it would alleviate so much pressure and enable United to play better. So it's part of the jigsaw. They're not going to sign a Harry Kane or an Erling Haaland to put the ball in the back of the net 50 times a season, but they need a better centre forward. And right now, their options that they have are just simply not good enough. I've said this before, but I don't think Højlund would get in any of the teams outside the relegation zone. I think Zirkzee are the same. But those two players have had to carry the burden of goals for Man United. So far this season, they've both scored 3 league goals. 3 league goals. Højlund scored 1 goal in 24 games. That was against Leicester. So they're so far out of the depth, it's untrue. So they have to replace him. They have to replace Zirkzee and Højlund with a striker. And it has to be the first part of the process, but it is about more than just goals.
Well, look, 30-odd years ago, Newcastle had a centre-forward that was tearing up the league in Andy Cole. And there was only one place he went to, and that was Manchester United. Now we've got Alexander Isak, who's doing the same at Newcastle, 30 years on. And Manchester United are not even in the conversation about whether he could move or not. And I know Newcastle want to keep him, and I know Newcastle fans get irritated about the idea that Isak's definitely going to leave at some point. But let's just speculate on that. Potential, Liverpool, Arsenal, those are the 2 Premier League alternatives for him.
what does it say about where United are and how careful they have to be themselves as a club in the market? That they just are not in the conversation for a player at the top level, and they are having to shop sort of lower down, if you like, with all the risk that comes with that.
Well, that's the reality of where they are. You know, Alexander Isak wouldn't even think they're going to Man United, would he?
We've seen that recently, you know, with Declan Rice, Jude Bellingham. You know, it used to be the case under Fergie, even quite close to the end of Fergie, where United would be a big enough club to go and pluck the best player in the league from all these clubs. You just think of Michael Carrick, for example, at Tottenham. You know, Tottenham are a big club, and Michael Carrick was one of their best players. And Fergie went to Tottenham and went, "We're having him," and he went, and that was just the end of it. And those days are gone now, and it has made, you know, the part of the reason, or the biggest issue, the biggest reason United are in this mess financially and sporting level is because of recruitment. They just haven't got recruitment right. They've struggled to adapt to the shifting sands of the transfer market. You know, like not being able to just go and pluck the best Premier League players anymore. And it means that to get back to a level that they want to get back at, they're going to have to make a lot of correct decisions very, very quickly. And recruitment is tough at the best of times. You know, I think I've said on this podcast before that, you know, United have said in the past that your big clubs have sort of said, you know, signing new players is so tough that we look to get around 70% of our decisions right. Well, United probably can't afford to get 70% of their recruitment decisions right. It needs to be 95, 99. You need to get all of these decisions right again and again and again to get back to the top.
I think United are where Liverpool were in 2017. So it was Jurgen Klopp had been at the club for about 18 months, and they had to start, you know, rebuilding. And they signed that summer Mo Salah, who at that point was a Chelsea reject, had been to Italy, got to Fiorentina, to Roma, going for early £30 million. Gino Wijnaldum had been relegated with Newcastle. Andy Robertson had been relegated with Hull. They were taking chances on players, but because they had good people in their recruitment department, they realised that these players were going to provide a lot more value than people realised. So that's where United are. And it really worked for Liverpool, but they probably got 95% of their deals right. You know, Naby Keita didn't prove it to be that good, but obviously Salah, Wijnaldum, Robertson, amazing signings. And United need to do that again. And I'm not saying Liam Delap will be another Mo Salah. That's not going to happen. But what they need, and they haven't had this in any kind of concept for the last 10 years, they need a player to go to Man United and actually improve. I think Bruno Fernandes is the one player they've signed, and Rob might be, you guys have a think. Since Alex Ferguson left in 2013, how many players have gone to Man United and become better players? Good luck with that one.
Well, so, I mean, in that context then, I know we talked about the importance of the Europa League to Manchester United season before, but do you get a sense that they're having to create two plans for this summer, basically? One is if they've got Champions League football that they can offer to potential new signings, and also obviously the revenue that comes with that, and one without. Do you get a sense that there are two different plans? Is it that seismic a change to whether they manage to win the Europa League or they don't in terms of next steps?
Yeah, well, we sat down, the Manchester reporters went to London for the stadium announcement, and we had a briefing with Omar Barada, and you know, at the end we were allowed to ask questions that weren't necessarily related to the stadium. And one of the questions was, in terms of transfer budget, is it literally plan A for Champions League and plan B for no European football? Now, Barada initially was quite reluctant to kind of say, yes, we've got one list for the Champions League and another list. But the more he kind of answered, it kind of proved that they do have two lists, because it is that big a deal in terms of, you know, the budget that may be available for new players, but also, you know, the way that they even attract new players, because, you know, players like Liam Delap is probably going to have an awful lot of options in the summer. There are an awful lot of clubs looking for strikers, you know, United, Chelsea potentially, Arsenal almost certainly. You know, if you're deciding your next step, again, it's one of those situations where in the past, a young striker in the Premier League, it would be an absolute no-brainer to go to Man United, and that's just not the case anymore. So if you're faced with a choice, possibly, I'm not suggesting Arsenal, I mean, obviously, James, you'll know more whether Arsenal are actually in or not for him. But if you're faced with a choice between Man United and Arsenal can offer you Champions League football, but Man United can't, that's quite a big thing for a player. So I do get the sense there are two lists. I think that a lot depends on whether they win the Europa League and what kind of budget they have. Again, you know, it's whatever the budget is and whatever kind of prospects that they can offer these new players, they just have to get these decisions right, because they just can't afford any more false dawns and poor choices.
I think there are three lists. the two lists that you mentioned, a list that also covers how many players didn't get out of the door. Can Marcus Rashford, can Anthony, can Casemiro be offloaded? Because if they can, that'll free up a lot of money in terms of fees and in terms of the wage bill. If Kobe Mainoo and Garnacho are part of that conversation, I think Garnacho more likely than Kobe Mainoo. But if Rashford and Garnacho are allowed to leave, as we know they're homegrown players, that could generate 60, 70 million in terms of pure profit, as they say. So there's two lists. There's a no European football whatsoever. There's win the Europa League and Champions League, and there's also that kind of caveat as to how many players they can get out, what they can raise for those players, and how much they can get off the wage bill, because that could be the most significant element of all, because they've got a lot of players that are still draining the wage bill that haven't delivered.
And just finally then on this, we've sort of touched on it, but how much do we feel that there's going to be a sort of striker merry-go-round this summer? We talked about United. We know Chelsea want a forward. We know Arsenal want a forward. Liverpool probably want a forward. There's a lot of names out there. It does feel as though, to me, that there could be a bit of a domino effect this summer, that one moves and then two or three could follow. What's the sense you guys are getting? Rob first.
I think so. I think we've seen in transfer windows in the past where maybe there's one. Strikers are obviously always at a premium. I think it's quite rare for so many top clubs to potentially be in the market for one particular position. Now, those clubs will tell you that they're probably looking at different profiles, that the type of striker maybe that Arsenal are looking for is different possibly to the type of striker that United are looking for. But there just aren't that many goal scorers in Europe at all. There are even fewer of the right kind of profile to make a move. You're looking at players between the sort of ages of 21 and maybe 24, 25, 26. There are even fewer of those. There are even fewer of those who are actually available. So you're looking at a really kind of tiny pool for United, Chelsea, Liverpool to all get, Arsenal to all get these players in during the summer. And it could just take one move. A club gets a load of money in a transfer fee, then goes and invests that somewhere else. We have seen in the past that these transfer windows obviously spark interaction with one deal. And I do think there could be some, a striker sort of merry-go-round, particularly with those Premier League clubs, and particularly because all strikers are a premium. Everyone will tell you that the hardest thing in football is to score goals. To find someone who can do that regularly at the right price, at the right wages is really tough to find. So if there are a few of those players floating around, it wouldn't surprise me if a few of those clubs decided to go into the market for strikers this summer.
I think that this could all start with Darwin Núñez at Liverpool. I think Liverpool let Darwin Núñez go. And I think that Salah will stay, but if he doesn't, then you're talking Liverpool really need a striker. But I think Darwin Núñez will leave Liverpool, which means they will have to replace him. And then you're looking at what happens to Ollie Watkins at Aston Villa. Obviously Arsenal made a cheeky late bid for him. Will Arsenal go back in for Ollie Watkins? United really no need a striker. Harry Kane situation, I think he's probably going to stay at Bayern Munich, but there's a potential that he could be prized out of this summer if the club makes the right offer. Arsenal need a striker. There are so many potential options. What's going to happen to Osimhen? Because obviously Napoli want to get him off the books as well. So absolutely, I think this year is the summer of the strikers, and I think it could all start with Núñez at Liverpool, and that could lead to a lot of things, a lot of deals being done.
Yeah, Osimhen, Chelsea put in quite a bit of work late in the day with Osimhen before he went to Turkey, and I do wonder whether that is a deal they may look to revive. Arsenal have. It's funny, the sort of some of the fallout from the whole Ollie Watkins situation is it's all been presented to me now that it was actually Villa who were driving that. And Villa was sort of suggesting, look, we need to move on one of Watkins and Duran. And obviously the conversations were going on with the Saudi club at the same time that Arsenal was talking to Villa about Watkins. And so I'm not sure whether that situation potentially will be revived in the summer. They've done a lot of work on Benjamin Sesko. He's certainly been the player that they've tracked, I would say, most fervently over the last 12 months or so. Arteta likes Isak, but I think the sort of mood music around Isak is that he's not going to go anywhere in the summer except for a stellar bid, which I'm not sure Arsenal would necessarily do now because they've got one or two other positions that they also need to strengthen. So that might sort of curtail that. Which leaves Gyökeres, and he's not someone who's just appeared on their radar out of nowhere. But I think because of the sort of shifting sands elsewhere, I think Gyökeres is becoming a little bit more of an option for them. as time goes on. We'll stay across ESPN's channels. The three of us will be doing our best to tell you what's going on as soon as we find out ourselves. And thank you for joining us this week, and we'll catch you again next week.